Okay, it's 10:02, so I'll start the webinar. Welcome to the 2025 Title 24 Triennial Code Cycle Update for Part 4 and Part 5 webinar brought to you by the Department of Healthcare Access and Information, otherwise known as HCAI. You may download the presentation for today's webinar in the Go-To panel under the Materials section. We will be answering questions at the end of the presentation and during intervals throughout the presentation. If you have questions, please type them in the question panel. We will not be answering questions from raised hands during today's presentation, so please type all your questions in the question panel. If you experience transmission difficulties during the presentation, please log out and rejoin the webinar using the login information that was sent to you by GoTo. Today's presenter is Larry Enright, the Senior Mechanical Engineer and Mechanical Technical Lead in the HCAI OSHPD Building Standards Unit. Can we get the next slide, please? AIA California will be providing 1 unit of learning credit for this webinar for AIA members who are logged on. You do not need to self-certify. Just a reminder, please remember to individually log in to receive credit. Once again, thank you for joining us today, and I'll now hand the presentation over to Larry.
Thank you, Summer. Again, welcome to the Title 24 Part 4 California Mechanical Code Update. My name is Larry Enright. I'm a Senior Mechanical Engineer in the Building Standards Unit here at HCAI under OSHPD. And I will be presenting the OSHPD amendments to the 2025 California Mechanical Code. First off, we added some new amendments here in Chapter 1, Administration. This is Division 1 for California amendments. Under 110.6, there's an actual new OSHPD designation for OSHPD 6. This coordinates with the California Building and Administrative Codes for chemical dependency, which chemical dependency recovery hospitals. For the most part, for Part 4 and Part 5, OSHPD 6 will be mostly under model code. California Building Code Section 1229 has requirements for the functions, and essentially the national standards with Facility Guidelines Institute requires these spaces to comply with either an ASHRAE 62.1 or 62.2 based on the size. Moving on, for the 2025, we added a new definition for air terminal device. This is to coordinate with some of our changes in Section 408 and Table 4B for HEPA filtration, and the definition is based on ASHRAE terminology. Next up, moving to Chapter 3, under 321 for essential mechanical provisions. Our new section here is provided for 321.3, and it's for cooling equipment necessary for to maintain temperature and humidity for one operating room and other spaces as identified in the functional program. This code section was coordinated with CDPH as we were evaluating MPC 5 requirements and emergency planning. There's also a minor change to 321.6 for all control components. Also want to specify this is for fire and smoke dampers, as those normally shut down on normal power. We need to keep those energized to keep the system operating during loss of normal power. Next up in Chapter 3, we have 322, sensitive areas or rooms. This list was updated to bring in some similar room types from 1224 for operating type rooms. The list was reorganized, and then also procedure room class 2 imaging was added. Moving on to Chapter 4 for ventilation air. The OSHPD amendment for Table 4A was moved from 402.1 to relocated into 402 from 402.1.2, sorry, to 402.1. OSHPD's trying to make sure that our amendments are in the middle of the model code, so there's a new paragraph there, and then the additional requirements for using ASHRAE 60.1 for non-Table 4A spaces was coordinated with this amendment. So the next section here, 402.1.2, the Uniform Mechanical Code adopted the 2021 edition of ASHRAE 170. The previous code cycles, the 2013 edition of ASHRAE 170 was adopted. So we're revising our amendments to coordinate with the 2021 edition. So this language in this paragraph was moved up to 402.1. And some of the amendments following this were coordinated between the OSHPD Chapter 4 requirements and ASHRAE 170. The following line at the end was to note that requirements of this code conflict with ASHRAE 170. The most restrictive requirement shall prevail. Some OSHPD requirements are a little bit different than ASHRAE requirements. So both standards need to be utilized together. Following on with the same section, some of the amendments to modify ASHRAE 170 adoption were changed. So the thing here was to note instead of not adopting the specific ASHRAE 170 section, was to note that provide a pointer to the OSHPD amendment in the section number to make it more easily to compare the two. Also, similar before, the ventilation tables are referenced with Table 4A in the California Mechanical Code. Continuing on with some of these modifications in the same section, some of the items pertaining to airborne infection isolation, protected environment were noted. And then again, some additional references to the ventilation tables in Chapter 7, 8, 9 have been replaced with a reference to Table 4A. Moving on to Section 406. This section just had a strike through, and just to point out the provisions of the code that are removed have a gray font and a strike through here. The new changes are underlined with blue. So in this section, just the food preparation area was being removed from the section. Food preparation is included in Table 4A, and this is to coordinate with some of the filtration requirements in the national standard. Moving on to Section 407.1, the exception 2 provided all the unoccupied turndown requirements. Rather than have a long section with multiple requirements inside of the exception, these were moved to Section 407.7. So the new pointer here for the unoccupied turndown will point to 407.7. So moving on to 407.2.2, the new section 407.2.2.1 is added to bring in the requirement for exhaust height discharge for specific spaces of infection control. And this is in accordance with the national standard. It'll have height and the distances from outdoor intakes and building openings. And these are the hazardous exhaust areas, including airborne infection, bronchoscopy, compounding, morgues, and similar type spaces. Moving on to 407.3, air balance. New sentence was added at the end to clarify airflow values must still provide the minimum required pressurization when balancing. Some air balance tolerances can be as high as 10%. For the airflow value then 10%, and meet the approved plans, the required pressure differentials must also be maintained. It's just to clarify that. Moving on to Chapter 4, ventilation. We did a little bit of reorganizing with this section. There were requirements for 420 was also dealt with air distribution devices was brought into the section. 407.4.1.3, the new section, pretty much will take the 407.4.11 amendment, and we're going to split that up into multiple sections that deal with each requirement. And then reorganization 407.4.1.2 is brought over from 407.4.1.6. So just a little bit better flow to get the general requirements, and then followed with the more room type specific requirements. So following that, 407.4.1.4 is a new section to provide directional airflow for Class 2 imaging and procedure rooms from clean to less clean. 407.4.1.5 will locate the return and exhaust inlet requirements for operating room type spaces. Excuse me. 407.4.16 will split out separately the Morgan ops occupancy requirements. So this just makes it read a little bit better so we can read one section for each specific requirement. And then 407.4.1.7 is the relocated 407.4.1.2 for position of low inlets. With those changes, the corridor and the next sections were revised section numbers to 407.4.2, and the corridor requirement was revised to be more in line with the California Building Code. This OSHPD amendments went in place prior to the building code requirements for corridor airflows, and so this is being updated to match the multiple changes that have happened since then in the building code. Moving on to 407.4.5, this is renumbered from 407.417. This deals with what is now called recirculating room units. The charging statement's been revised, and the item 3 is bringing all the filter requirements rather than pointing to 408 and the multiple sections. Now all of the minimum MERV 8 filtration to match the national standards provided for the specific room unit in this section, and that allows multiple other sections to be taken out of 408. So a little bit of a simplification here. Number 4, specific for coils such as chilled beams. These systems need to be designed to have temperatures above the dew point and should include some sort of indication if that condition is not satisfied. So for 407.4.5.1, this is a section was added. The bringing in the ASHRAE 170 requirement for recirculating room units, that only applies to spaces under ASHRAE 170 with OSHPD or OSHPD amendments apply to the building. So this section is necessary to handle non-table 4A spaces, and they can just meet the 62.1 requirements, which we've outlined here, that the recirculating room unit may have filtration as recommended by the equipment manufacturer, and this will clarify spaces for IT rooms, mechanical spaces, or other non-table 4A spaces. Moving on, we had some changes to 407.5, and this is for variable air volume. 407.5.1.3 was to revise that. The purpose to maintain space pressurization. New section 407.5.4 was provided to complement the requirement in 407.5.1, since the spaces are not permitted to have VV by the charging statement, and this to help ensure that the return air to these spaces will maintain the air change rates and pressurization. Most of those spaces have pressure requirements, and by the other sections will require supply and exhaust return control to maintain the space pressurization. 407.5.15 was added. National standards refer to ASHRAE 90.1 for return fan tracking. This provision is not included in Part 6, so some of the languages that also takes into account space pressurization was added. So moving on to 407.7, this is the unoccupied turn down. So this was previously the exceptions in 407.1.1. We provided a charging statement and then 4 different criteria to split it out to make it easier to understand. So this is not a change or new requirement. This is the specific requirements in the existing paragraph, and just the section was revised in format. 407.8, building pressurization is a new section. This section is new to 2025 and brings in a requirement to prevent building infiltration, and which is also an ASHRAE 170 2021 edition. And it also coordinates with section 407.5 and 407.7. Moving on, we're into section 408.1, which is for filtration. This section was revised to coordinate with requirements in ASHRAE 170 to provide HEPA filtration at the air terminal device. The air terminal device was also the new definition was added previously in chapter 2. The previous organization of this chapter allowed a third filter bank at the air handler unit to do the HEPA filtration. This section's been coordinated with the national standard requirements to provide that at the air terminal device of the room. So that'll be for operating rooms dealing with more sensitive critical surgeries and also protective environment rooms. Uh, 408.2 is filters for hospitals. The 3 sections being removed were previously identified as non-central recirculating area handling systems, and these are now identified as recirculating room units and are addressed in 407.4.5. The filter requirements for this type of system is the same for all conditions. So whether or not the unit or the room function can use a recirculating room unit will be identified in Table 4A, and then we'll go to 407.4.5 for the requirements of the recirculating room unit. Similar here, this is the SNF, skilled nursing facilities, intermediate care facilities, correctional treatment facilities, filtration requirements. 408.3.2 and 408.3.3 were for the non-central recirculating air units, and this is taken care of by 407.4.5. 408.4 is the filters for outpatient facilities. Similar changes here. And then 408.5 is just another adding a pointer to also provide clarification that filters for recirculating room units will provide per the section 407.4.5. And also pointed the note that where Table 4A does not permit a recirculating by means of room units, that as long as these units meet filtration per Table 4B, then they are permitted. Moving on to section 409, 409.3 is for installation of ducts, was stricken in this code cycle. This is a duplicate amendment down in chapter 6, so 409.3 is removed, but it's not removed from the code. The chapter 6 amendment is still applicable, and this is a duct requirement, so it's more properly in chapter 6. Moving on to section 414 for airborne infection isolation rooms. 414.1.1, previously the height was 7 feet. National standard requires 10 feet, so we've updated the requirement to match the 2021 edition of ASHRAE 170. And then 417.0 is the testing and balancing for those rooms. The last sentence is just to note that the air balance testing shall include a pressure test at the doors, surveilling the isolation protected environment in any rooms to provide the directional pressure relationships in section 416.1. And that's essentially to meet the alarm requirements that's being checked and tested. Now moving on, so Table 4A, we show it stricken here, so we still have Table 4A. The existing Table 4A was so rather than provide all the changes there was multiple changes between the 2013 and 2021 editions. So rather than trying to incorporate all those changes, we started with a base.
Your audio cut out for just a second.
Okay, thank you. So moving on next, the Table 4A here is shown. So as the table's shown in the code, this one's a little bit different. All the normal straight font is actually the ASHRAE 170 table items. All underlined and italicized font are OSHPD amendments to the table, and most of these amendments are brought from the previous code cycle. Typically how the code cycle works is all amendments previously in the mechanical code are brought forward with changes as needed. So we will kind of go over the notable changes to be discussed today. If you would like, the express terms and statement of reasons describing these changes are available at the California Building Standards website under the rulemaking page for the 2024 Triennial Code Adoption Cycle. And all the final documents can be found under the Commission Meetings tab. It is located under the December 17th, 19th, 2024 meeting. We should be putting a note in the chat for how to find that. So a couple changes between the ASHRAE table and the CMC Table 4A table is that all the FGI section callouts were revised and they were replaced with similar 1224, 25, or 26 or 28 sections corresponding to the California Building Code functional requirements. And this helps kind of determine whether that space is intended for either a hospital, skilled nursing, or what type of a functional location it's for. We've also provided some, rather than just adopting the 170 table names that are based on FGI terminology, some of the names have been revised to match the California Building Code terminology found in 1224 and the other sections. And some rooms not currently adopted under Table 4A were shown stricken. Besides that, a new unoccupied turndown column was added. Some of these were modified to match the existing OSHPD amendments for unoccupied mode found in the previous slides. And so to start off, the previous Table 4A was an alphabetical arrangement. This one follows the ASHRAE 170 format. It starts off with nursing units and other patient care areas, and we'll group those type of spaces in an alphabetical format for that section. And we'll group rooms by and functions by service type. So this is continuing with Table 4A. We'll have multiple slides here to show. This again shows either revised terminology to match 1224 and then existing OSHPD amendments from the previous Table 4A brought into the table or underlined. Also, I want to point out at the top of the table, Table 4A, we added the OSHPD banner, the OSHPD 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. That previously wasn't in the table. It's supposed to identify all OSHPD amendments. The title was reorganized to match the 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 designation order. So that's why you see the change with correctional treatment centers and acute psychiatric. We're still in nursing space. This is previous OSHPD amendments brought forward and room functions coordinated with the CBC technology. And this section of Table 4A starts with diagnostic and treatment areas and follows the ASHRAE 170 format. For the Class 1, 2, and 3 imaging room that was brought into the California Building Code, the previous intervening cycle. So some of the rooms based on CBC location and terminology, these rooms were placed under the Class 1, 2, or 3 imaging. These spaces could be a higher terminology. Those procedures list is required whenever there's a Class 1, 2, or 3 imaging, and CDPH confirms the correct class. So CT scan, if it was doing a Class 2 imaging, could be a higher ventilation and mechanical requirement based on the procedures. And there is a printing error there for cancer treatment on the FAT, but that was fixed in proof phase, so the printed version will be corrected. This section continues with diagnostic and treatment spaces, and then it's followed by support spaces. Again, the terminology for these is shown as revised to more match the OSHPD amendments in sections 1224, 25, 26, and others in the California Building Code. Similar environmental services room is changed to housekeeping to match 1224.4.15 of the Building Code. We continue with more support spaces with the OSHPD amendments for pharmacy compounding added in there and brought forward to the table. Those are based on the USP requirements. Continuing with pharmacy compounding, there was one change to the non-HD anteroom air change rate. It was revised from 30 down to 20, and this is to match the USP 797. As an anteroom for non-HD is only required to be ISO 8, but if it does serve both an non-HD and an HD room, the HD anteroom requirements are more restrictive, required to be ISO 7, and still maintains the 30 air changes per hour required. This table continues with a support service space for sterile processing. So we get our sterile processing ventilation requirements in one section, and then it's followed up by other general support services. The table continues with support areas for nursing units, and then is followed by the skilled nursing and intermediate care. So the OSHPD 2 type facilities will have a distinct section for those room types. Includes like the resident type rooms. This slide continues with skilled nursing for service and support spaces for skilled nursing and intermediate care. So for the CMC table 4A, the footnotes for the ventilation tables. So we adopt ASHRAE table 7.1 footnotes mostly and provided some amendments. The existing amendments that didn't have any changes are brought forward are not shown, but those are still provided in the table. We did some, just address some of the changes that we did to the footnotes. So in footnote E, rather than reference the ASHRAE 170 sections, those have been replaced with mechanical code sections. Footnote G was just a relocation from a previous note AA to take up a not used space. Note I was kind of providing the mechanical code has commercial cooking areas, so you're providing a pointer to chapter 5 in the section 511.3 requirements. So footnote J was revised to match with terminology in the CMC and as the tables are set up, and footnote EE here was revised to match with the terminology of the California Building Code, chapter 12, rather than the FGI callouts from the ASHRAE standard. Moving on to table 4B, starting off, so the OSHPD banner was also added to this table to identify the OSHPD categories or designations that it's for. And then similarly, the title was reorganized to match the order of 1, 3, and 5 designations. Table 4B, we did have some updates for the 170/2021 edition of ASHRAE. And this is when the HEPA filter is required, it's in the air terminal device of the room served. So the orthopedic, bone marrow, organ transplant type operating rooms, when they require HEPA filtration, it'll be now at the ATD, which is designated as the air terminal device, rather than filter bank number 3. We also removed the MERV 17 as the MERV 17 doesn't quite meet the HEPA requirements, and HEPA is what is called out from the national standard. Continuing with the table 4B, class 1 and 2 imaging and exam were added to the list for patient care areas. And then the footnotes were updated to match some of the requirements. So footnote 2 was repurposed to identify the acronym for the ATD, the air terminal device. Footnote 3 added the HEPA filter requirement found in 170 which is going to meet the IESTRP test method. Footnote 4 was revised to note the location for the air terminal device of the room served. And number 5 was bringing in the HEPA filter requirement for the air terminal device of protected environment rooms. However, it does provide a pointer to one of the exceptions in ASHRAE 170, section 722C. Moving on to table 4C, the OSHPD banner was also added this table for OSHPD 2 and 4. And footnote 2 was revised to coordinate with section 406 requirement and the national standard requirement for the minimum filtration for food prep area. Moving on to chapter 6 for duct systems. We still have some OSHPD 1R designations in the OSHPD banners. Just to refamiliarize, if you're not familiar, the 1R is for buildings that we're removing acute care service. So they'll essentially just be standard buildings under OSHPD jurisdiction that aren't able, due to earthquake standards, to hold acute care services. So those buildings will not have typical healthcare requirements. They could house a 2 or a 3 or potentially a 5, and if they do, the requirements will fall under those designations. So moving on to section 603.411 for flexible ducts. There was one change to the flexible connector for our flexible duct for the volume mixing boxes for alignment, and that was reduced from 10 to 5 to match the model code requirement. For the terminal devices, it'll still be at the 10-foot length. And then another sentence was added at the end of the section, just to provide a clarification and pointer to CBC 717.5.4, specifically for when dampers omitted in the corridor. All the duct construction needs to be steel of not less than 0.019 inches in thickness. So this amendment doesn't override the building fire and life safety requirements. Moving on to 605.2, this is just to add a couple of similar type rooms that are outlined in the CBC 1224 for the thermal acoustical lighting requirements. And then to also provide a pointer to ASHRAE 170 for these non-sensitive areas for the general requirements for duct lining to be in accordance with section 6.9. And then 605.3, as the HEPA requirement is in place for those rooms, we need to have the number 17 was removed. Moving on to chapter 11 for refrigeration, table 11 of 4.1 was just being updated. The intervening code cycle, the state fire marshal removed I-2.1 occupancies from the code, and this is a holdover. So this is being stricken as I-2.1 occupancies are no longer in the code. The ambulatory type healthcare, that'll be under a group B under special requirements in the, I think, section 422 of the building code now. So they're a group B occupancy of all those requirements. Moving on to chapter 18, reference standards. The HEPA filter standard was provided, and that was referenced in table 4B. So at this point, that concludes the part 4. I'll kind of look through the questions real quick to see if I can answer anything. And so if anybody wants the slides today, they're under the handouts tab. You can download them. There was a question back for the VAV. The code sections are not intended to require individual control for each space, but it depends on the design and the layout, and that'll be looked at during plan review. Individual control of the space gives a lot more capability for unoccupied mode and to control each space, but it can be done by unit or floor, or depends on the layout arrangement and what spaces are served. Essentially, pressurization and minimum air changes are required. And then we will also provide, take the questions and provide answers, and we'll post those on the website when we post the webinar video at the end. See, and we'll also follow up with additional questions at the end as time permits. So moving on, also covering today Part 5 California Plumbing Code Update. Chapter 1 Administration, this is similar to the Part 4. New Section 110.6 is added for OSHPD 6. Again, most of these requirements are going to fall under model code for these spaces. And 1229, the California Building Code provides functional room requirements for these types of units, and will address fixtures. So moving on, Chapter 2 definitions. There was a couple changes to the definition for hand washing fixture under Section 210. Under faucets and trim, item C, the flow rate was addressed to align with ASHRAE 188 and Guideline 12 for flow rate of hand washing fixtures to be not less than 1 gallon per minute. And this is for required hand washing fixtures for infection control. We do have under the table hand washing fixture for lavatories and restrooms. The public restrooms still have to comply with Title 20 for 0.5 GPM and those public types, as those are the only ones permitted to be sold in California. But for the other hand washing fixtures, for water delivery and limitation of Legionella, we're looking at 1 gallon per minute. Item D, just a minor change to the tolerance on the 180-degree return. Some of the models on the market will have up to a 10-degree tolerance on the outlet position. So that was just to bring in to make sure we weren't excluding any specific models out there. Moving over to Section 221 is for scrub sinks. Previously, the code sent the requirements for controls to the hand washing fixture requirement in 210. So rather than send to a separate section, we revised this amendment to provide the scrub sink controls requirements in this definition. So that's upper extremities are not supposed to have any contact, so the foot, knee, or electronic sensor controls are what's required. And this aligns with Table 4.2 footnote requirements for scrub sinks. Also added another item in accordance with National Standard for FGI that a single lever wrist blade, those aren't permitted on the controls for activation, but they can be for the temperature preset valve, so they can adjust temperature prior to hand washing. Moving on to Section 310, these were just reorganized for model code changes. So the OSHPD amendments will have some new numbers. Moving on to 319, previously this was not permitted for OSHPD, that's stricken as this is just a general requirement and points to Chapter 13. We do have amendments, and we've kind of reorganized how the matrix will show adoption of that chapter. Moving on to 422, we had a couple changes to 422.3 for fixtures. We did bring in the OSHPD banner for OSHPD 6 for this section. And the exceptions were modified. Now that there's numbers, we added a second exception. And specifically for small waiting rooms, for public waiting areas with an occupant load of 10 or less, just noting that one toilet facility is okay in line with model code for those types of spaces. However, it needs to be a single use and shall be permitted for use by both sexes. So typically these are labeled all gender per 1224 or the other building code sections. And this will help with small clinics or remote waiting areas where the previous table showed 1 and 1 for one male, 1 female for all waiting areas, regardless of size. Moving on to 604.0 for the potable water materials, the OSHPD exception. The exception has the banner, so we're removing the under authority of OSHPD statewide health planning development, as the state office is not intended to be in the amendments. And just noting that this is the amendment applies to the potable water applications of 604 is just for the potable domestic water system and doesn't get extrapolated to other systems. Moving on to 609.10, this is for disinfection of potable water systems. A new item 5 was added. This coordinates with requirements in ASHRAE 188 and Guideline 12 and some of the other recommendations out there that there's a timeline for disinfection. So depending on the disinfection time frame with either occupancy, it'll require either additional flushing or potentially redisinfection of the system if it's too long, such as 4 weeks. And this is to prevent water age from water sitting in pipes as the construction waits for the final occupancy, so we don't get Legionella growth. Moving on to table 613.1, this is the hot water requirements found in the back of chapter 6. Some of these footnotes were updated to coordinate with the retail food code requirements. The rinse water temperature is supposed to be 180 unless a chemical disinfection is used. So previously didn't have the chemical disinfection allowance noted. However, that's accepted by the retail food code. And 3, dietary hot water temperature is to meet the minimum temperature requirements at the point of use per the health authority. So for dietary, we note 120. We typically do our water temperature requirements at the source. However, retail food code wants that delivered at the outlet. So that's to make sure that gets coordinated between the 2 code authority requirements. Moving on to 613.2, a sentence was added for the hot water supply. So storage water heaters and hot water storage tanks shall be maintained at 140 or above. This is again to prevent Legionella growth, to get it out of the Legionella growth range, and coordinates with ASHRAE Guideline 12 and California Plumbing Code, the Appendix N. Sticking with hot water requirements, 613.6, hot water distribution system. So our hot water requirements are based on FGI requirements for hospitals, and those were revised for the non-recirculated fixture branch piping was 25 and it dropped down to 10 feet. That's for matching the national standard. The first sentence there is also to make sure that the recirculation piping shall return the recirculation loop back through the hot water source. The temperature range is 120 to 105. 105 is in a heavy Legionella growth range. So again, trying to coordinate with the other standards to make sure we're preventing Legionella growth in these systems. And similarly, 613.9, the hot water distribution shall include test ports and valve openings for flushing of portions of the systems. And this is supposed to be coordinated with design with the facilities water management program as defined in Appendix N. As far as the systems, we try to limit links and dead ends and provide recirculation, but water age can still be a problem. And testing needs to be coordinated with the facility and the licensing requirements, and any valve openings for flushing is needed to maintain that hot water system. So moving on to 614, this is for dialysis water distribution systems. We're moving the banner as an editorial to the start of 614.0 to note for OSHPD 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. CPVC was added. We're updating the standard, which was previously RD62, is now in the 235.00 series. So the RD62 was changed to 235.00.2 from AAMI. That's the ANSI AAMI ISO standard. And then 614.7, we're recording this requirement. Again, we pointed to RD62, which is no longer being carried forward, and pointing to the AAMI 235.00-2 and -3 standards for dialysis for the water treatment. Moving on to 615, our emergency water supply requirements are under 615.4. However, that's just the charging section is identification of potable and non-potable water lines. We're just going to move that to 616 to make sure that's its own separate section. So these are just changes of section numbers. There is one change here. SPC 4D was added to coordinate with the structural requirements and the admin and building codes. Excuse me, and then 616.2 is also a rice code section. We did add a 616.3 for storage tanks. Generally, holding large amounts of water in tanks on site is not recommended just due to water quality issues. However, it is needed for emergency procedures. So the MPC 5 requires the on-site water supply, and this tanks to help, or this section's to help identify some of the water quality requirements to help provide a clean water supply. So tank connections and circulation need to be designed to prevent stagnation and temperature stratification, and possibly supplemental disinfection is needed where the public water supply disinfection levels are not adequate to maintain that. And again, this needs to be worked with the facilities water management program and needs to be brought into the design stage when these tanks are being put in. Chapter 7, section 727 is for emergency sanitary drainage. This is similar to the water requirements that SPC 4D is a new SPC category and is being added to this section. So moving on to chapter 17, this is the reference standards. So we're replacing the RD62 with the AAMI 235.00-2 and -3 standards in chapter 17. And that concludes the part 5 changes. Summer, are you online? Do you want to go over
Did
some
you
of the
want to
contact?
did you want to go through any of the questions or answer them later?
Yeah, go ahead and give the information for the contact, and I'll start looking through the questions, see what I can
Okay.
answer.
Sounds good, thank you. This brings us to the end of our presentation. We hope you found this webinar to be helpful. Please remember, if you didn't download the PDF presentation, you may do so now by going to the materials section of the go-to panel. Alternatively, the slide handout will be made available on the HCAI website in approximately 1 week. Also, today's session has been recorded and will be made available on the HCAI website in approximately 2 weeks' time, along with the question matrix. If you have any questions about this presentation, please email the regs unit at hci.ca.gov, also shown on the screen. Please add the webinar title in your subject line so it's easier to filter through the questions. It's been a pleasure being with all of you today, and thank you for your time. I'll hand it over to Larry if he wants to go through any of the questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And then so we will try to we'll note all the questions and then we'll give a good, nice written response to them, but we'll try to pick up a couple as I can. So there was a question about fiber-free acoustical liner allowed. So the sensitive spaces identified in Chapter 6 for the OSHPD amendment, essentially like the boxes and anything else we're looking for either soundproofing on the exterior or like when the boxes have insulation, those need to be like the sheet metal faced with insulation behind. For other spaces outside of that, it needs to meet the ASHRAE requirements. I think they believe they'll also point back to 62.1 and it meets the standard, then it's acceptable. We did have a question about 609.1 for shutoffs, and we'll coordinate that with our fire safety, fire prevention unit. Those are actually from the state fire marshal and coordinated with OSHPD. And we'll try to get a good answer on that because some of the code sections do need some help understanding the intent behind that. So there was a question about hand wash sink for pharmacy. The CBC requirements bring in the USP. The USP requires the capability of the fixture to wash up to the elbows, and that's in 1224 under the compounding area of the pharmacy requirements. So typically that's going to be a scrub sink because scrub sinks are essentially designed to go up to the elbow. There are some other sinks from some other manufacturers that are maybe in between it, that aren't quite the scrub sink size. They're a little bit smaller and they'll still allow that scrubbing to the elbow. So the point is getting a product approved that will allow you to easily get up to the elbows. Let's see. So there's a question about change of 422.3 meant for reducing the number of staff restrooms. So we're actually tackling that in the intervening code cycle, which is in process for the July supplement, I believe in 28, to talk about the staff count too. So for FSD e-Power, we'll go ahead and coordinate with electrical to get an answer for that one. Refrigerant type systems for IDF rooms. Currently the 2022 supplement brought in the A2L requirements, if I'm answering that right. And so that's in the code. We're looking at currently, we're getting a lot of A2Ls coming in, and that's a big focus point. And then let's see, the last question is asking about table 4 requirements for admin spaces in OSHPD 1 buildings. So the charging statements in 402 talks about ventilation requirements are generally per table 4A or any type of healthcare space that's similar to 4A. You need to match that function or similar function. You just can't name it somewhat different not to meet those ventilation requirements. But spaces that are outside the scoping of table 4A, which admin spaces, lounges, locker rooms would be a good example. Those are going to follow under what's currently pointed to ASHRAE 60.1, which is also printed in section 403 of the California Mechanical Code. We're also looking at revising those callouts in the intervening cycle. However, so you're either going to be a table 4A space in the healthcare facility, or there's lots of spaces that don't qualify as one of those healthcare spaces or support spaces that can be under model code ventilation rates. So at this point, I just want to thank you everybody for attending. Again, any other questions, please feel free to reach out to the regs unit at hcai.ca.gov. And thank you. Have a good day.